How many films about dogs do there have to be? I've seen a lot of these too, what the hell? Homeward Bound, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Air Bud, remember that shit? I don't even like basketball and I loved that movie as a kid. All it was is one trick padded to 90 minutes. They didn't even tell me that dog died of cancer months after that thing came out. And they couldn't let it end there either. Look at this crap. Whoever wants to see this much Bud? You know what's missing in these lists? Something not totally banal and family friendly, which go hand in hand quite often. Sometime late last year, I found one that I thought fit what I was looking for. Something that wasn't going for overly sentimental tugging. It had to do with Michelle Williams because at the time I had just seen Brokeback Mountain and Venom. She was on my mind and this looked like it wouldn't suck. Brokeback was boring and Venom was fucking trash, so I needed to see her in something good quick to balance it out. I thought it was her first dog movie, but she'd been in Lassie as her first legit film role. And I saw that one as a kid too. Wendy and Lucy is a movie that doesn't have much in the way of plot. Something I seem to really be finding in stuff I review. It's misleading to call this a movie about a dog and its owner. That's not its basis, as writers John Raymond and Kelly Reichardt have stated. It's about America on the decline and the people who are first to fall. Themes of precariousness, helplessness, desperation, and how quickly one mistake can put any one of us on the path of poverty. Adapted from Raymond's short story, Train Choir, the real-life event that influenced this creation was Hurricane Katrina. Having caused devastation across certain Gulf states, primarily Louisiana, people's lives were upended and ruined. One stance from others on the people affected was condemnation. How could they think living in a place that's bound to have dire consequences from flooding was worth the risk to stay there?
Seemed to be this kind of animosity towards people that, you know, like you didn't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so the hell with you. And so I think one of the questions we started with that was really sort of the nugget for Wendy and Lucy was the question of what is our responsibility to each other as strangers and as, you know, just neighbors or just really even with strangers, like what's the, do we owe anything to each other? Are we supposed to be taking care of each other? And I think always going back to this idea of what the American dream really is supposed to be and what are the possible interpretations of that.
That's the crux of what R&R, Raymond and Reichardt, were trying to accomplish with this, with no studio interference to stop them. Reichardt, who I can describe as professor by day, director by summer break, had worked with Raymond on her previous film, Old Joy. Their working relationship was a lot more close-knit than most due to the incredibly small-scale productions they were involved in. I'm talking micro-level cast and crew with lower six-digit budgets. The process of creating what eventually would be the film itself was a very private one, with both writers building off each other's own amendments to the script and not having a full view of what things would actually look like even when the principles were underway. It just so happened that the story got zoned in on Oregon as Raymond was already living there, where Reichardt was staying in Portland after traveling from the East Coast. Call it laziness or convenience that the film would end up being shot literally around Raymond's house. The movie says Wilsonville, Oregon, which isn't too far from Portland, and it's supposed to be where the movie takes place. But after spending more time than anyone else would give to this mundane task, I found one of the primary locations, which is in fact so Portland. I've actually had to do work at the Army office right there in the same neighborhood before. With the setup out of the way, the movie needed its two leads. The first one was someone already well known to Reichardt, Lucy, her own dog. Having already had her in Old Joy, it made it simple to keep her close and on camera. Michelle Williams, who had seen Old Joy and was blown away by the performances, wanted to have that type of role to be immersed in without the gleam of Hollywood. She was contacted by director Todd Haynes, who had worked with Williams in his 2007 film I'm Not There. He was executive producer for Wendy and Lucy, which is how Reichardt easily zoned in on her after watching Brokeback. Williams got in contact then with Reichardt, who she hadn't met yet, and she was cast and on set within days after completing her scenes in Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York. She'd undergo a transformation from MILF to me back in high school. The budget on this was in the ballpark of $300,000, which Williams mentioned later was already there prior to her joining. The rest of the crew and I think some of the cast was working for free, or on a point-based reward system, so everything was put forth just for the film. There was little to no rehearsal, with conversation and time spent together before and between scenes to gauge what acting was going to be like. This is reminding me of My Summer of Love, where Pavel Pawlikowski would have a barely scripted scene and let the actors figure it out on their own. Reichardt leans even more on the neo-realist influence than Pawlikowski, being inspired by Italian neo-realism and capturing the ground-level rawness of life. A film to compare this with in the same style is Umberto D, an Italian film about a man and his dog trying to stay out of poverty in post-war Italy. Umberto D's real-life bleakness outmatches this one, but this is one that we can relate to on a closer level. To get into the plot, Wendy is on a road trip with her dog to make it to Alaska, where the hope is that she can get a well-paying job and escape her predicament. She's thus far made it to Oregon from Indiana, which she left behind, having nothing more than what she can fit in her car. The entire film is her here in Oregon during the last years of the Bush administration. Although alone, following her from the Midwest is the aura of the lower working class, stripped of its backbone and pride. The American dream wasn't where she was anymore, with the answer of moving west harkening back to the old days of exceptionalism, expansion, and carving your own way of life. Williams was not given the rundown on the political implications filled within the movie by Reichardt. Her focus was just on her character, foregoing most comforts and amenities an actress of her status would get. People on the street couldn't even tell it was her after her transformation. Williams wanted this role, albeit with clearer direction than what Reichardt initially gave her, filling it with a pensive association. The blank stares on her face capturing someone who really looks like they hit rock bottom. At the beginning, we observe them playing peacefully, before any details are introduced. It's the only scene before any info is given on her current situation, after which those facts make the viewer's outlook more concerning than calm. They come into contact with what many would consider the dregs of society. They remind me of crust punks that I used to see and sometimes hang out with when I went to concerts, where they traveled from other states for temporary stays. We may see them as dregs, but Wendy is only one notch above being in their shoes. One key difference being that she has a purpose, a dream of a new home, not having given up on the system as they have. On a limited budget and what's believed to be a one-way trip, Wendy has to make ends meet. This means giving up her privileges, if she had any to begin with, judging from a phone call later in the movie. Sleeping in parking lots, cherishing gas stations, and hoping that all this is worth it. She doesn't want to be seen as a nuisance or someone trying to leech off others, yet it can't be helped. To make matters worse, her car won't start and she's stranded. Her frugality is sensible, but she takes it a step too far, probably not the first time, by stealing. When you're this close to the edge, the right choices become blurred. One risk was taking this trip, the next was trying to skimp on food, and this time it costs her. She's apprehended by a young store clerk, and this guy seems way too eager to see her punished.
Sir, your employee has the wrong idea.
The rules apply to everyone equally. If a person can't afford dog food, they shouldn't have a dog.
Andy.
Sir, I just made a mistake is all. I'm very sorry. This isn't gonna happen again. I'm really very sorry.
Food is not the issue. It's about setting an example, right?
I'm not from around here, sir. I can't be an example.
We have a policy, ma'am.
She's booked, processed, and released, upon which the fine she pays is far more than the value of what she stole. The big issue, though, isn't the money, it's her dog, who is nowhere to be found. The film is her trying to fix her situation while finding Lucy from then on. Wendy starts this movie relatively alright, with everything she needs to start anew. A day later, her car's broken, she went to jail, her budget was slashed, and she lost her dog. Try swapping places with her and see if you don't cave in. That demoralized feeling is one layer under Wendy's face as she tries to contain her emotions and not fail in the eyes of society, her family, or herself. Everything that I've laid out up to this point tells a second story. Of upward mobility, how far people's obligations go in helping others and sacrificing now for a better tomorrow. Character-driven and heavily reliant on Williams' restrained performance, how you go into this movie will make it or break it. Very little happens, sort of, and most often it'll just be Wendy on screen or seen from her perspective. Sam Levy's cinematography works well in this naturalistic lens on America's deterioration. No need to sanitize something or make it overly dramatic when you can just let it play out convincingly. Sometimes just seeing the real thing says more than making something up. Part of me liked this film, but the other part wasn't wowed by it. There are long stretches of seeing one thing after another with not a lot of emotional weight behind it, or just waiting for something interesting to take off. I suppose my own expectations of seeing something happen to Wendy, alone, frail, and easy to be a victim, made me imagine something far worse happening to her before the ending hit. R&R don't tease anything, simply letting things play out and come to its conclusion irrelevant of taking sides for or against characters. Budget will limit a film, as will merely translating script to screen. A story this small is done compelling enough to get its message across, but how much it'll hit you will vary. With the glut of dog films eliciting mostly mixed to poor responses, I'd like to think most of us have some standard toward them. In many respects, Wendy and Lucy sets itself apart and above its peers in the genre, an alienation stepping closer to Leave No Trace territory than any typical dog-based film. Shot in 2007 in a 3-week span on a limited budget, edited for 6 months and resulting with something that might be one of the better examples of its genre is commendable. This would be the first of a few projects between Reichardt and Williams, who would reunite for Meek's Cutoff and Certain Women. I have yet to see those, if I ever will, but I give Williams credit for being better than when I saw her doing this.
Do you want to talk about that kiss?
Oh, that? You call that a kiss? No, that was your buddy's idea.
Oh, right. Well, that is good to know.
It did feel kind of great, though.
Oh, god damn. Okay, I'm done. See it if you want. Before I go, I gotta give her props for going on the road to promote this film under extremely stressful circumstances. It takes balls to be able to keep it together when tragedy hits. Lastly, is there enough to comment on Lucy's performance? We aren't seeing Air Bud levels of trickery here. I'd be surprised getting any animal to do anything significant on camera who wasn't specifically trained for it. She does her role as much as needed, linked to both her owners on and off screen. She went on for many years by Reichardt's side, even during her teaching hours, eventually passing away prior to the filming of Certain Women. Lucy, you got to be in a good dog movie. Hell, you got to be in movies without even knowing what they are. That's more than most of us could say.